Hey, this is Jack, and this video is called The 5 Paradoxes of Understanding Men. Hey, if you're new to the channel or you haven't yet subscribed, I want to invite you to subscribe. Click that subscribe button, should be on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen now, and then tap the bell notification so you hear of new videos as soon as they come out. Now, this video is called The 5 Paradoxes of Understanding Men. I'm going to get into it, but just before I do, I want to explain why this video is important and why I'm making it. One of the reasons I'm making it is because I commonly see women earnestly applying a principle that they've learned in my video or someone else's video, which is a good principle. But in the application of the principle, they misapply or forget to apply another principle that might also be important. Or sometimes they apply the principle so single-mindedly that they actually in some ways throw the baby out in the bathwater. And I want to say, if you're watching this video right now and you've been watching my videos for any length of time, you're probably someone that is at or is looking to be at a higher level of development. And at higher levels of development, some of the things that are true at earlier stages of development just aren't quite so true. And one of them is you've got to learn how to be with more paradox. You've got to learn how to be with like, oh, this may be true, and this may be true, and this may be true, and I need to hold all of them in order to take right action or to have right thought. And if I don't, I can actually kind of shoot myself in the foot because I'm taking something that's a good thing, right? That could be like, I don't know, drinking coconut water. But if you only ever drink coconut water, it might actually not be good for you because you're going to miss out on other nutrients. And it's a bit like that when we're applying some of these teachings into our lives, right? It's sort of like, you know, I sound Buddhist at the moment, but it's kind of like the balance or the moderation is important. And so as I go through these paradoxes, I think you'll make sense of what I'm saying here, which is that we want to take certain principles and be nuanced in how we apply them in our lives. So paradox number one is be in your power with a man and also let him lead. Be in your power and let him lead. Now, if you have had poor boundaries in your previous dating and relationship experiences with men, you may need to learn how to strengthen your boundaries. You may need to learn in other ways how to reclaim your power and how to communicate effectively and ideally lovingly to people, how to be with you, how to treat you, what your desires are, what things work for you and what things don't work so well for you. Now, the idea with boundaries, just as a quick caveat, because I see so many people when they're talking about boundaries, they look at people that have really strong boundaries and they're like, that's what I want. I want really strong boundaries. And for most of us, that's not actually true. What we really want is, and forgive the fancy phrase for a moment, is we want selective permeability. That's a phrase from biology, and it basically means a cell knowing to let the right things in and keep the wrong things out. Most of us don't want to have really strong boundaries. We actually want to invite more closeness and intimacy a lot of the time. But we want to know when that we need it, that we can trust ourselves to hold a strong boundary, rather than we definitively just have strong boundaries and keep a whole load of good stuff out. So if you've been thinking about how can you be in your boundaries more, how can you reclaim your power, I also want to invite you as you're doing that work to also notice, is this having you come into your masculine more than is serving you? And by masculine in this instance, I mean the part of you that is initiating, the part of you that takes action, the part of you that takes the lead. Because most of you, listen to this right now, not all of you, but most of you, if you have a feminine essence, you actually want to bring more of that essence into your relationships, which means more ability to relax, more ability to let him secure the scene, more ability to let him lead, more ability to actually be receptive and not have to make all the decisions and take the lead. Right? So this is a little bit of a paradox. Sometimes people's move into their power is actually concurrent with a move into their masculine. And I'm asking you to learn how. How can you hold feminine boundaries, so to speak? How can you be in your feminine essence and still hold the boundaries that are true to you? And that is a little bit of a higher order integration. For most of you, it will be harder to do than actually just, hey, let me get really good at stating my boundaries. Right? We're actually saying, hey, can you state your boundaries and also stay in your heart and also be in your feminine essence? That's paradoxical. That might take some learning. It might take some integration for that really to arrive in your life. Okay, let me have a look here. So the second paradox is don't change him, but you must be able to influence him. Don't change him, but you must be able to influence him. If any of you are aware of the work of John Gottman, one of the world's foremost marriage and long-term partnership researchers. He will say that one of the facets of successful long-term partnerships is the ability of both partners to receive influence from the other person. When the other person says, hey, I've got a suggestion, or hey, here's something I think might be useful for you, or hey, here's something I want to work on in our relationship, that there is a willingness to be receptive. It doesn't mean that a guy has to hear you every moment of every day of every piece of feedback you want to give him, but it does mean that there's a general context within which he is open to receiving influence from you. That is actually one of the biggest gifts that you might be able to give a guy in a relationship, is the benefit of your influence, is the benefit of the ways that you can help him be a better man. Not because he's doing it for you, not because you're making demands of him, but you're actually calling it forth from him. Now, this is different than you needing a guy to change, right? Most people, you included probably, prefer not to have to change for other people. Most of us prefer to change because it's part of our own evolution, because we've got a willingness to come to the table and say, hey, this is something I want to change in myself. This is something I want to work on, right? So if you are looking at your guy and saying, hey, you need to change in order for me to be in a relationship with you, you might have a problem there. Right? Most people aren't going to want to change for you in that way. And paradoxically, there may be situations where you need to say, hey, I'm taking a stand for me, that there's a level of connection and a level of emotional availability and showing upness that I want in a relationship. And currently that isn't available with you, and I'm actually going to take a stand for it, right? So there are examples, plenty of them out there, of women who've said to a guy, look, this is kind of casual, and I want something that's more committed, and more committed might look like this to me. And the guy goes away and thinks about it and reflects that actually he does want the relationship and he is willing to step up in certain ways. So I'm distinguishing that, which is sort of like, hey, can we get on the same playing field in order to play better, with an ongoing need that you are only in the relationship for some future that hasn't yet arrived, and that if it doesn't arrive, you don't actually want to stay in the connection. Right? That's normally a dangerous place to be in dating, when you're getting ahead of yourself or needing the guy to change, or, oh, if he only could learn this, then I would be in connection with him. Oftentimes that's a little bit of a mental fallacy. It might mean that it's not your guy, but it's not the most helpful way to approach relationships. So don't need him to change, but do find someone who's open to receive your influence. If you have zero ability to influence your guy, he probably isn't your guy. Right? Because the right guy is going to want to receive influence from you. Now, paradoxically speaking, again, you need to learn how to communicate and influence in a way that he can actually hear. Most people aren't very able to hear influence if you are criticizing and judging them. Most people aren't able to hear your influence if you're not talking to them at a time that it is good for them to receive your influence, right? So most guys in the middle of their workday don't want to receive your requests for influencing him as easily as they might receive them when you guys are out on a date, or you're chilling at home, or he's got some more kind of availability to you. And if you are bringing your ability to influence him and it's coming from a place of wound, right, or a place of I'm not enough, or a place of I'm triggered, or a place of you shouldn't be doing this, it's going to be much harder for him to hear that. So it's much easier for him to hear that if you're actually making a genuine communication about influencing him from a place that feels more whole and less reactive within you. I'm saying this because sometimes I've had the experience of talking with people or coaching with them and them saying, look, I have zero ability to influence my guy, or he just doesn't listen to me, or he's checked out. And part of it is that actually the place that's being talked from to him is a place of resentment. And that's actually what's having him have difficulties hearing you. So you want to check, when I'm talking to them, am I coming from a place of, actually, this is okay, or I'm okay, or we can do this? Are you coming from a place of possibility? Are you coming from a place of compassion in the way that you're communicating? All of us generally are more receptive when you can do that. And it's not always easy, because sometimes we're triggered, sometimes we're angry, and we also want to be able to bring those things into our connection. But if you can take a bit more responsibility for yourself, and that it's not just like he's your only problem, most guys will probably find that a little easier to hear. All right, paradox number 3. Give him your emotional life, but don't be emotionally reactive. Give him your emotional life, but don't be emotionally reactive. Most men, if they're really your guy, actually want you to bring some of the content of your emotional life. They realize that it brings a richness. They realize that it opens up their own emotional life, that it opens up their own heart centers. Most men are not so readily connected to their heart centers as a lot of women. And that's one of the things that you can really bring as a gift into the relationship. What I'm doing here is distinguishing emotional vulnerability or emotional authenticity from emotional reactivity. Right? Emotional reactivity is I'm kind of in a story, I'm kind of looping, I'm kind of picking up things that happened in the past. I may be blaming, I may be being dramatic, I may be building some kind of self-image out of my suffering or out of my problems. And it's different from an emotional vulnerability. When you're really emotionally vulnerable, you don't sometimes know what you're even going to say. Right? You don't know what needs to be said from your place of sadness or from your place of grief or from your place of joy. Right? There's a kind of presence, there's a kind of unfoldingness that comes through you when you're in that emotionally authentic place. Emotional authenticity often tends to have the rise and fall of emotional experience, by which I mean it's not like there's the same emotion that you just keep gripping onto. It's like actually once you've expressed your sadness, it can move through you, kind of like clouds moving across the sky. It's like your emotions can be a little bit more like that. Most guys find it much easier to be with emotional authenticity than they do with emotional reactivity, right? Emotional reactivity for a lot of guys, they're going to start to tune you out, block you out, distance, retreat, withdraw, because most men don't want to be blamed. Most men don't want you to remind them of the things that were difficult about mom and their upbringing if she had that pattern with them, right? So you want to learn how to distinguish those things. Reactivity tends to mean you're losing presence, tends to mean you're spinning out into a story. Whereas emotional authenticity has a bit more of a directness, of a here and nowness. This is what I'm actually feeling in this moment. And I don't necessarily need to amp it up and get lost in the story of it. I can actually express it a little bit more cleanly and with a little bit less attachment. So learn how to distinguish those things, because sometimes you may be in the narrative that I'm not able to bring my emotional life to this guy, right? That we're not able to connect emotionally. And it may be that if the balance of what you've been bringing him is emotional reactivity, that you're actually missing an opportunity and there's something else here that you can try, right? Before you believe that a guy isn't available to connect with you emotionally, you might want to practice really bringing your authenticity and your vulnerability for enough period of time. And I know that's difficult and that's sometimes a hard ask, but if you can do it, it actually gives you a good read on, is this a guy that wants to be in that territory with me? Maybe he's not competent there. Maybe he's not super literate. Maybe you need to hold his hand a little bit. Maybe he needs to learn from you. Maybe you can even lead in this territory, right? Paradoxically. Maybe this is a territory for you to lead in, but don't draw a premature conclusion if most of what you've been bringing is some kind of drama or reactivity, or at least that's been his experience of it, because you may be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. All right, on to paradox number 4. Find someone to fight with, but don't take abuse. Find someone to fight with, but don't take abuse. Most mature adult love relationships that go the distance and are about making both people more conscious are going to involve some fighting. They're going to involve some conflict. Ideally, you learn how to fight better, right? So fighting better, I'm totally learning about this myself. Fighting better is about keeping things narrow rather than broad, so not letting arguments spin out into all sorts of territory versus, hey, there's actually a specific issue that I have a specific request that I want to communicate to you, or there's a specific thing that you're doing that is having this impact on me and I want to talk to you about it, or there's a specific way that our finances are going down that doesn't work so great for me and I want to talk to you about it. So you can learn how to fight narrower, you can learn how to fight fairer, right? Which means you're actually more open to hearing one another, you're more open to your own perspectives not being the full truth, you're more open to the constructive side of conflict, right? So a lot of us, if we're conflict avoidant, as soon as conflict happens, we're like, oh my God, there's a problem. Oh my God, there's no way back from this. Perhaps he's going to leave me or he's going to abandon me. And you've got to learn how to include conflict and even the possibility that conflict makes relationships stronger. When we can work through something and get to the other side, it makes us stronger, right? And for a lot of us, that involves a bit of a rewiring if that's not the download that we got in childhood, right? If in childhood, you having conflict with one of your parents meant that they didn't talk to you for a while, or they disappeared, right? Or they left and went in a room, or they got super strong and overpowered you, right? That's probably not going to leave you with any kind of imprint that conflict is a good thing. But mostly what I see of couples who are really doing their work together is that they have their edges because they are showing each other the places that they can't be whole, they can't be free, and that they can't love. And they realize that a lot of relationship isn't just about trying to be happy. That a lot of real mature adult relationship is about learning to love better. It's about learning to love yourself and someone else in the places where that's difficult, where you've got to grow your capacity to love, where you've got to grow your heart muscles, where it's not just, oh, this is an easy thing for me to love, right? Most people can love on the light side of someone. Can you love on the dark side of someone? Can you love someone in the places where they are myopic, where they are confused, right? Where they are hostile, where they are shut down, right? That's what a lot of mature relationship is showing us. And at the same time, you want to be able to distinguish, yeah, I'm not here to be emotionally or physically or otherwise abused, right? So there's a discernment here. I'm not here just to take being abused ongoingly. I'm not going to just be here for that. I actually want you to learn to talk to me in a way that I can hear from you. I want you to learn to talk to me in a way that feels inclusive. I want to talk to you in a context where we can actually hear and receive from one another, right? And probably, if you're anything like most of the people I've worked with who are in a relationship that's got some conflict, at times that may not be the only tone that's present. It may be at times that there's, you say things you regret, or you go over the top, or you come on too strong with one another, right? And that's all part often of the learning of how to really do conflict better in relationship. The way I'm saying you don't want to solve conflict is by having a zero conflict relationship. Normally that means that one or other of the parties are not in their power, they're not expressing their truth, that they're under-metabolizing what's real and true for them, that they're stuffing, suppressing, repressing, dissociating. They're doing some kind of defense that keeps them away from the reality of what they're actually feeling and experiencing. And that comes at a dramatic cost in relationship to your own life force, to your own realness, to your own authenticity. And most of the times over the long term, if people are doing that, they either just compromise and have the relationship that's just much less quality than it could be, or they eventually check out of the relationship in some ways, right? And that's not what you want if you want to commit to a long-term relationship. So find someone you can fight with. But if you in the past have been in a series of abusive relationships, you've got to learn back to the first thing that we talked about is how to be in your power, how to hold the right kind of boundaries, and how to notice if you are starting to slip at the first sign of conflict. Are you slipping into some kind of pattern which is actually not helping you because you're kind of avoiding the conflict, or you imagine that the conflict is going to be insurmountable? What would it take for you to ground yourself, feel your feet on the ground, breathe into the experience and say, hey, okay, there's some conflict coming up right now. Let's be with this and see if we can use this as a productive and constructive force in our relationship. All right, on to paradox, the final paradox, paradox number 5. See his potential, but date the present. See his potential, but date the present. The right guy for you is going to be someone that you see even becoming a better man, right? Maybe you can see the ways that he can grow into his heart. Maybe you can see the ways that he can become more potent in his career or mission. Maybe you can see the ways that he can become a better partner to you, or a better father, or maybe a one-day father, or maybe he can become better in his relationship with money or friends or power or diet or whatever it is. So the right guy is going to want you to see that he can become a better man and to be his good ally in that process. But that is different from, I'm only seeing that and I'm kind of checking out from the present reality. I'm kind of mistrusting myself and my own ability to see the red flags as they're coming up. Right? Because a big part of trust in a relationship is actually it's learning how to trust yourself, trust your intuition, and trust yourself to notice the things that are coming up in the present. You don't want to date the past. You don't want to date the future. You want to date the present. If what is in front of you is not what you can actually right now accept being in relationship with, even with all the growth that you and I both have to do, if right now you can't accept being in relationship with the guy, he's probably not your guy, or he's not your guy in this cycle. Right? If you can't date the present and you're having to date the future, he's probably not your guy, or you might have a little bit of inner work to do called, let me get much more present. Let me stop fantasizing and futurizing and intellectualizing and anticipating. Let me learn how to keep my attention more firmly present in my emotions and my body and in the here and now. Right? And for most of us, that's work. For most of us, that's ongoing work. But you want to get real about the present. If you can't accept a guy as he is today, he's going to know that. He's going to feel it. And that's different than saying, hey, there's a way that I want you to show up in this relationship. I want my man to show up. I want to connect more than once a week. Right? That comes back to, you might have to say, hey, there's kind of like a standard for us getting on the playing field. But once we're on the playing field, if I can't really accept who you are, we might have a little bit of a problem. If I've always got to go into the future and be like, oh, one day this guy is going to be this guy that I actually want to date, he's probably not your guy, or you've got some inner work to do, So see his potential, champion his potential, see the ways that he's trying to grow, see the ways that he's trying to grow his career, he's trying to grow his impact, he's trying to grow his integrity, he's trying to grow his meditation. See all those things, champion them, appreciate them, reflect them back to him. but don't make it a standard that he's got to jump through a whole set of your hoops and your standards in order to be in relationship with you. If that is happening, it probably either means one, he's not your guy, or two, you have a strong inner critic that holds all sorts of standards over yourself. And part of your deeper inner work is going to be, how do you relax your inner critic? Because once you learn how to relax your inner critic doesn't need to run rings around your partner. Right? Once you learn, hey, I can love and accept myself in these places, oftentimes it means it's much easier to say, hey, I'm not going to just push all my standards over you. If you've had low standards in the past, you might have to learn how to increase your standards. But at a certain level of development, it doesn't come about projecting your standards onto your partner. It actually becomes about you saying, oh, I notice I'm getting critical in this place, and it's a place I'm critical of myself, and I'm starting to project that over my partner, and let me learn how to relax that over here rather than needing you to change over there. Right? That's often the order of higher level development. So, those are the 5 paradoxes. I hope they've been useful to you. I hope they've given you some nuance that you might have been struggling with. Maybe you've been on one side of the equation, but you haven't seen the other side of the equation. I want that to be a powerful influence in your life. Please leave me a comment. And hey, if you haven't taken my free webinar, if you've liked what you're hearing here, you're going to like what is distinguished on this webinar. It's called The 3 Keys to Being Relationship Ready. It's with my teaching and business partner, Clayton Olson. It's gotten rave reviews. It's got some really powerful distinctions. It'll be 90 minutes, some of the best investment of your time this year. So just click the first link below this video, find a time that works for you in your time zone, and we will see you there. And again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, come on, let's do this. Let's have dates together in the future. Hit the subscribe button, click the bell notification so you hear of new videos as soon as they come out. I look forward to your questions and comments. As always, I'm Jack, and thank you so much for being here.